right, good evening. This is an event organized by the Civics for the Community Committee, which is a committee sponsored by the Borough of Highland Park. Many of you were here a month ago to hear a talk by the state climatologist on climate change, and maybe some of you will be here on December 18th, but back in the old place in the middle school to hear about someone from the Census Bureau to talk about why it's so important to get an accurate count and why it's such a big problem for New Jersey and such a great need for New Jersey. So that'll be on December 18th, and that's going to be sponsored or co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters. My name is Beth Stevens, for those of you who don't know me, and I generally introduce these things. Tonight what we're going to be doing is hearing from 3 experts on what is now known as creating aging-friendly communities. It's communities to think about, or they're experts on how to get places like Highland Park thinking about how to create arrangements that keep those over the age of 50, both mobile, civically engaged, socially engaged, and in residence in their own homes. Just 2 facts to give you a sense of the context here in Highland Park. As of the 2010 census, Highland Park had just under, literally 1 person under 14,000 people. Of those, 20.5% were over the age of 50, between 50 and 64, and 17.6% were over the age of 65. So if you quickly do the numbers, that's over a third of the population are people who would definitely enjoy the fruits of an aging-friendly community. But as we're also talking about just briefly, a lot of the arrangements or practices or changes that we can make to make it aging-friendly are actually the kind of practices that help everybody or lots of people in the community. Like making the traffic lights a little bit slower to change so that people who are mobility impaired get another 5-10 seconds to get across the intersection. So things like that. We've organized a panel of 3 experts, and right now they're going to sit over here because they also want to see the slides. But they will be sitting over here during the question and answer part of the evening. They'll each be talking for about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. Now, first speaker is going to be Christine Newman. She is the Director of Community Outreach and Volunteer Engagement for the AARP, New Jersey. She has a social work degree, and she works to advance the AARP's, or ARP's, social mission to try to equip people who are over the age of 50 to age by living their best lives. And how can we make that happen? Tonight, Christine will be talking about ARP's work in what they call Livable Communities. And her focus is to help communities create age-friendly practices and policies. Second person who's going to be talking is Kathy Rowe, and she's the coordinator of SOMA 2 Towns for All Ages. And SOMA is South Orange and Maplewood, and they often combine to do a lot of programs and policies. So that's where you get SOMA. Kathy holds a doctorate in public health from Columbia University. She's worked for years on both working in and doing research on underserved communities and the development of age-friendly policies and practices. And so she today is going to be talking about more real-world experience. What's it like for another community to try and create age-friendly policies and practices? And the third speaker is Emily Greenfield. She's an associate professor in the School of Social Work across the river in Rutgers. She's got a PhD in human development from Wisconsin. And her research generally aims to look at the social environment for older adults and families. And tonight she's going to be talking about her research on age-friendly community initiatives across the state and across the country in general. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Christine Newman, and she's going to start us off.
Thank you. I have my timer to make sure that I stay punctual, because I am from Jersey, I do talk a little. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out on this lovely, rainy, cold night. But we're excited to have this conversation to really share some information about what we can all do to make our communities more livable and age-friendly. So I'm going to start off with an overview of the work AARP is doing and our age-friendly network. So just by background, AARP has been working to make communities more livable and age-friendly since our inception 60 years ago. And we are the U.S. affiliate for the World Health Organization's network of age-friendly communities. So we work to enroll communities here in the U.S., and I'm going to talk more about that in depth later. But I wanted to start off by just asking the question, why? Like, why is this important? We're seeing this work really start to pick up momentum across the country, and I think that that's always the first place to start. And I would say it starts right here with our demographics, and I'm sure folks in the room, this probably looks familiar. So what we're looking at here is this hugely significant demographic shift that we are currently going through in this country. This represents the percentage of our population 65 plus, where we were in 2015, and the darker blue means the higher that percentage, and you can see the drastic shift that is not anticipated to happen, right? This is happening now. You know, when we look at today, almost 46 million people over the age of 65, that number is going to go to 73 million by 2030. This is a huge historic moment. For the first time ever, by 2035, we're going to have more people in this country over the age of 65 than we have children. That's never happened before. And you know, we're talking about not just our population aging, but it's a different type of age. You know, people are living longer, but they're also living healthier, more active lives for much longer. And I know a lot of times this conversation, you know, typically talks about the boomers, right? How this is the boomer generation, but this isn't a blip that we're seeing just with a boomer generation. This is a trend that is going to continue. In fact, any guesses? Do you have any idea what percentage a 10-year-old who is, you know, today in the US, what is their chance, what percentage that they're going to live to be 100? Any guesses? 35. 50%. 50% that they will live to be 100 or older. So this is really why this is such an important thing for us to be talking about. And not just the demographic piece, but also, this is what folks want. So if we just look at some recent research that AARP has done, 8 out of 10 adults say they want to stay in the communities that they call home currently. 77% strongly agree, I want to stay in my community as long as possible. What I find interesting though is, when we look at folks, you know, who say they want to, let's go to what they believe. 46% believe they'll be able to stay in their home. 17% aren't sure, 24% think they'll have to leave. So there's a disconnect there, right? You've got 77% that say they want to stay, but you've got a big chunk of people who aren't sure if they're going to be able to. And that's where this idea around age-friendly and livable communities really hits home. And the question is, are communities ready? You know, traditionally, we've built homes and communities for children and families. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's everything good about that. But when we talk about age-friendly communities, we're talking about how do you add in that aging lens. So not just children, not just families, but anyone at any age can stay and thrive in the communities that they call home. We were actually just talking about this before the presentation started, that traditionally we build roads for cars, right? Not for folks to walk, ride, or roll. And really, for folks who are mobility challenged, that can be a big barrier by the way we design our communities. Same thing with homes, right? Homes are typically designed for active young families. We don't necessarily think about making a home good across a lifespan and across abilities. Not a lot of homes are designed intentionally with universal design features at this point. And so these are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about in terms of the built environment in our communities to make sure that folks can stay and thrive where they want to. So at this point, I like to just sort of pause because I've said livable communities and age-friendly a couple times already. And I think these terms can get, there's a lot of overlap, but I want to explain sort of how ARP frames this. So when we talk about livable communities, we're really talking about a broad umbrella for how you improve the 8 domains of livability. So the 8 domains of livability come out of the World Health Organization model. And it's really how do aspects of the built environment and the social environment impact individual and community outcomes. So really, livable applies to all 8 of these domains that we'll talk about in a minute, but in a very broad sense in terms of how you make improvements for the community at large. When we talk about age-friendly is still talking about those same 8 domains, but this time we're really taking a targeted lens on making improvements for folks that are 50 plus or 65 plus or older demographics in a community. So I would kind of say, is it one or is it the other? I think it's both. And I think most people agree, right? Because we know that if we work on improving livability for everyone, that impacts our older generations. And if we focus specifically on older adults, it's not just like those benefits are only going to apply to older adults, right? When you make a street more accessible, when you improve a curb cut, that works for somebody who potentially needs a wheelchair or a walker, but that also improves the access for a mom with a stroller or anyone who's, maybe carrying a lot of groceries with them. So when we're talking about the 8 domains of livability, this sort of breaks it down, and I'm going to go through each of them briefly, but we're talking about built environment. So built environment is housing, outdoor spaces and buildings, and transportation. But then it also includes things like, are there opportunities for folks to come together and, engage in social activities, opportunities for civic participation. So really both are as important. And again, what we know older adults want is also what everyone else wants. So we're not just talking about improvements that impact one part of our demographics. Here's just some examples. When we poll people 18 and up, the results are the same across age groups. This is what folks want no matter what their age is. They want well-maintained streets, conveniently located grocery parks, safe parks, and well-maintained healthcare facilities. These come up across the board as what are important to folks. Here's some other questions that we asked millennials and baby boomers, and you can see again, looking at those 8 domains of livability, at least 50% of both demographics want the same thing. So I think one of the things that's a good opportunity when we're talking about age-friendly communities is how do we make sure we're thinking about this as this really is good for everyone, right? It's not like an us, a them, no. When we're working to make a community age-friendly, those benefits are going to be felt from the youngest of the young to the oldest of the old. So really quickly, so when we're talking about the 8 domains, so outdoor spaces and buildings, this is where we would think about our parks, things like outdoor gathering places, things like accessibility of buildings, sidewalks, really just to make sure that they can be used and enjoyed by people of all ages. Transportation, it's things like looking at what are your options for folks to get around other than owning a car. And how do you make sure that you're thinking about mobility across the span, that you have many options available for folks to get out to doctor's appointments, but also to social activities as well. Social participation, we talked about. So, how do we have opportunities to come together to avoid isolation? Housing, really thinking about thoughtful design in our housing, so universal design features, but also looking at your housing stock and inventory to make sure that you have not just a variety of options, but a variety of affordable options. And as everyone in this room knows, in New Jersey, right, you think about the two tough nuts to crack: housing, transportation. Respect and social inclusion. So a lot of the work around age-friendly that falls into here is opportunities for intergenerational connectivity. How do you have thoughtful and intentional opportunities for generations to come together, to learn from each other, to share? Civic participation and employment. How do we make sure that if folks want to work as older adults, they have that opportunity? They don't want to work, they want to volunteer. How do we make sure that there's those opportunities as well? And then community support and health services. So again, this is not just that you have maybe a hospital nearby or services nearby, but that access is there. So is it affordable? Can folks get the care they need? Not that it's just there in the community, but can folks truly access it? And then communication and information. I will say one of the things that I'm pretty sure all of our towns that are currently in the age-friendly network are focusing on is here. Because sometimes it's about how do you make sure folks know what already exists? What opportunities are there? You can have the best program in the world, but if nobody knows about it, then there's a disconnect. So one of the domains is really intentionally thinking about how you're communicating in your community about what resources and services are available. So then that brings us back to this question, right? We just talked about all these different domains that communities should be focused on if they want to stay attractive places for folks to age in place. Are we ready for this? What do you guys think? I see some like, and I'd say, yeah. I think one of the things that I see as a really good sign here is we are having a huge growth in cities that are signing on to the age-friendly network, who are saying, you know what, our community is going to make a concerted effort to address these domains of livability for our older adults. So this is a map that, and I'm sorry, every time I give this presentation, by the time I present it, it is out of date, because that's literally how fast this network is growing. But this kind of gives you just like an overall snapshot so you can see what's happening with our age-friendly communities. You can see where we've got a lot of activity on the coasts. But we have seen explosive growth in the network. So in 7 years, we have gone from no communities to, and I just updated this literally before I came over here, 424. This now includes 7 states. Let's see if I can rattle this off. Massachusetts, New York, Maine, Florida, Michigan, the Virgin Islands, and Colorado. So we have full states now that are committing to being age-friendly. New York was the first. So I see this as a really positive sign that there's growing momentum and recognition that this is important and we need to be paying attention to it. So now I want to talk a little bit about what developing this process looks like and what exactly is the process of becoming a member and joining the age-friendly network. So this is a 5-year cycle that a community is committing to of continuous improvement. So year 1 is enrollment, and what that means is you have the highest elected official in the community that commits through a letter that our community is going to become more age-friendly. We're committed to doing this. Once you're enrolled, the next step is year 1, which is your survey and your listening sessions. So this is about how do you do that community needs assessment, but not just needs, but also community strengths. Sorry, I can't turn the other way. So how do you also make sure that in those 8 domains, you're looking at what does our community already do really well? Where are our strengths? What resources do we have to do this work? And then also, where are the areas that as a community we think we have some room to improve and we want to focus on? So year 1 is survey, assessment, listening, and then you create an action plan. And you say, all right, out of what we've just learned, we're going to look at these 8 domains, and some communities are super aggressive and are like, we're going to do all 8, and we're going to focus on improvement in all 8, which is totally fine. Other communities pick like 4 or 5 and say, these are the ones we're going to focus on. But you decide in each of those domains, this is what we're going to work on, this is our goal, and then this is our plan to implement. And so then the next year 3 to 5 is implementation of that plan. And then year 5 is, okay, it's that, that good step that we all do after a process. You go back and revisit and say, okay, this was my goal. Did we actually achieve that goal? What worked, what didn't? So it's a very thoughtful process. And Kathy, I know, is going to be up in a couple minutes, and she's going to sort of talk about what this looks like in practice. But this is the model. And then in New Jersey, we have 11 communities currently who are in the Age-Friendly Network. The first was Princeton in 2014, followed by Montclair. And then you can see sort of the momentum that has picked up. What I love about this is we've got variety here. I mean, New Jersey is such a diverse state. And you see you've got, Westwood, right, which is a slightly smaller community than Elizabeth, which is our 4th largest city. So we've really got examples of how this work can happen in diverse communities and diverse scales as well. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the models, because I talked about how now we have states that are joining. So the great thing about our network is that literally single towns can join this. Kathy represents Soma, which is 2 towns who joined together on this process. So really, we have a single community model, or we have a county-based model. We now have a state-based model that really allows for flexibility, so towns and communities can make this work for them. Some of our communities don't just define themselves by the geographical border of one town, right? We've got Tri-Town, which is, I always forget if it's Chatham, Madison, and is it Madison Township or Chatham Township? The 2 Chathams and Madison, and because for that community, that's how they identify together. So there's flexibility there. We don't have any models that are regional yet in New Jersey, but in some parts of the country that are more rural, we see this has sort of happened, where maybe you'll have like a county that joins with a bunch of towns that are more in a rural area just to have a larger impact. And again, you can see you can have cities that join individually, together, counties that join individually or together, really what works best. And then the last slide I like to end with, because I know when I'm up here and I'm talking about 8 domains and all the stuff you can do and all of these, it can seem a little big. And one of the things that I love to always do is chunk it, right? Like, how do you take a big process and just focus on something small to start? And I think the great thing about when we focus on Age-Friendly is it is in little details, because that's what matters to folks in a community and what impacts them. So, in this here we have a picture of this couple here crossing a road. The gentleman on the left is actually a war veteran who still has shrapnel in his leg. Then we've got this gentleman here who's pushing a stroller with a child. And then we have this gentleman here who's actually a lacrosse player, listening to his music, trying to get to lacrosse. So totally different people, right? But right now at this moment, they all have one thing in common. It's 14 seconds. They have 14 seconds to cross that street. And so sometimes it's the smallest thing, like how do you work with your town to adjust that and add a couple seconds? And now that has improved the lives of everyone in that picture. So, we can think really big on some of this, but also never forget that sometimes it is these very small changes in those domains that makes a huge difference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kathy, to talk about SOMA.
So we're just blowing all stereotypes about technology because I couldn't figure that out at all, and age has nothing to do with technology. So I promise you, Christine and I did not coordinate making our presentations, but so much of what she said we are working on had the same results. Even some of the statistics that you had, we're in the process of evaluating our work, and we're doing a large survey, and we're seeing the same trends over and over. So, anybody know where South Orange and Maplewood are? Yeah. We're right by City Hall University. Okay, yeah. So, South Orange and Maplewood call it SOMA. Some people call it MAPSO. There's a little competition for, how you do that acronym. But we share a lot of resources. We share the schools, which is a huge part of the community and the biggest part of the municipal budget. We are in the process of sharing our fire departments, and the towns go back and forth. They share some staff, they share some things with building and code. If you live there, it's one community. You might go, like my kids went to school in South Orange, and then in the middle school they went to Maplewood. You might go to a soccer game in one town one weekend, the other town the next weekend. So if you live there, it's really one community. But getting the two separate town halls to work together isn't always that easy. So we started 4 years ago. Before I started, we had a consultant come in and look at our towns and look at it in terms of age friendliness. So I'm just curious for you now, like why now? What has happened, or why are you thinking of doing this now? Has there been a change or growing interest, anything in particular?
Actually, there were a number of people who came to the Civics group to sort of say this would be a great topic. And so that's how it happened.
That's a good reason. In SOMA, it started to come down to economics. And we have, the housing market got really hot. People were moving in, not buying a house before they had kids, moving in with kids ready to start the schools. The population in the schools was going up, we didn't have room for them, the budget was going up, and somebody realized every time a senior citizen sells their house, and they have a very low economic footprint, they're paying the same taxes, but it's not costing the town much. When they sell to somebody with children, that shifts the dynamics, and then it's a very expensive household and a heavy economic footprint. So I'm not saying that one is better, it's bad to have people moving in with kids, but it started to just register that economically it's better for the towns to keep our older residents. And one of the things too is we pride ourselves on being very diverse and inclusive, and including the people who are over 60 who have built this great community. As part of our inclusivity, we have to focus on them too. So to get going, if you undertake this, the first step is understanding your community. You have to know who are your residents and what do they see as their needs. What do they want? Not what you read in a book or an article or what someone else is recommending. You really have to find out what people want, what their priority is. We started with a needs assessment. An asset survey. We looked at the assets, the gaps, the challenges, and it was surprising what some of the assets were. Like this small group of women that meets once a month in South Orange is one of the strongest assets in both towns. One of the best assets for programming is the South Orange Library. The building is about to fall down. They finally voted for, they're going to do a renovation, but it's the programming and the community they have there is one of the strongest things we have around. So that was really important. And again, before my time, we did a survey, we did focus groups, we used the AARP survey, and got a lot of really good data on what people want, what they want to help do, and not what they want done to them. So it's important to really get that feedback. And the Livable Community tools, I don't know if it's age-friendly or livability now, I may have gotten that wrong, are really great tools to get you going between the survey material, the roadmaps to livability. So much is spelled out there, it can really make it easy on you. So our early steps things are to sketch out your structure before you get started. You have to see who is buying into this and is it going to be taken seriously. We have a problem with somebody has a great idea, they get really excited, and then it loses momentum. So for us to keep that buy-in, I'm actually a municipal employee that works for both towns. So I'm not a volunteer, and by doing that, both mayors weighed in on this and agreed to it and are on my committees. So from the top down, we really had buy-in and support, which has helped a lot. And then everybody needs to find the Nan in their community. Nan is 93. She moved to Maplewood when she was 2 years old. She's lived back and forth in both towns. She is one of our best assets. She has historical memory. She knows people. She remembers things. She's a fantastic woman with much more energy than I am. Finding people like your Nan is the way to really move forward. I mean, this woman, everybody knows her. She knows everyone else. If I go and ask somebody for something, you know, maybe. If Nan asks, it will be done. So you need to find those people. And you have to figure out where this is going to be housed. So in the 12 age-friendly communities in northern New Jersey, I'm the only one right now that's a municipal employee. A lot of others are housed in a local nonprofit. We don't have a nonprofit like that in our town. Some are housed in a medical community, a medical group, or with a hospital. Again, we don't have that. So you have to find out where can this be housed, where can it work, where can it be effective, and where can it be sustainable. And then build a senior advisory committee. If you don't have one yet, you really need to know what the people who are going to be impacted by this, what they're thinking, what they want. Because, like I said, if someone decides, reads something, researches something, and finds out what might be a good idea, that's not necessarily the same thing that the actual people, the seniors, the people this is supposed to be for, what they want and what their priorities are. So I spent way too long writing my dissertation, and after 10 years, my message was that the best policy means nothing without implementation, and it's something I see over and over. You could try the best, but if it's not rolled out well, you're going to lose momentum. So you really have to think of your structure, you have to build that, and you have to stick with it. It's important to set achievable goals, not something so far out that it will never get done, because people will lose interest. So for us, the thing that over and over, housing we know is really important, and housing is the most difficult thing to tackle. But now, 3 years in, I just convinced my management team on Friday, it's time to tackle housing. So we've delivered a lot in the last 3 years, and now we've just done the survey, and 90% of the people responded they have issues with housing and concerns about housing. So we've got our momentum, and it's time to take that on. We share the results as we go along, so it doesn't go into like some abyss and people say, whatever happened to that? And communication is really, really important. If you're communicating with people, it means you're also listening to them. And then you bring back, communicate to them that you are listening. You've heard them, you've set your priorities to align with their priorities. It's really important that you're working with people, not working at people. It's important to find your message and stick to it. And these are some of the things that I say when I'm making speeches or talking around town. I say that one of the reasons we are such a desirable community and a hot real estate market is because of the people that have built it over the last 20, 30, 40 years. That's why people want to move to Maplewood or move to South Orange. It's not for the people that are, you can't come in and buy a community. You have to build a community. And our seniors have built a wonderful community. Inclusivity, I said that's very important to our community. It means including the older residents. And a lot of people don't realize that. They are, there are so many different groups and so many different outreaches and programs, but how about the people that have always been here? They need to be included too. And Christine said this, alluded to this too. What's good for an 8-year-old is good for an 8-year-old. So that helps frame us as we're here for everybody. What we do for seniors helps everybody, and we don't want to get into an us for them. It's us and them. So communication, I think, is our biggest success so far. We send out so many things. We repeat ourselves a lot, but in the survey we're just doing, I listed 15 different things, asking people, where do you get your information? And most people have multiple sources. Guess the #1 source of information? Word of mouth. Like, Really? No matter what we do for mailing or email or flyers or internet, word of mouth. So if you get the message out to the right people and they're talking, you can spread your message. We still do flyers around town. We do consolidated calendars. We have a newsletter that goes out every other month, and I've got a sample for you. But any way we can do it, we will get the information out there. And it's important to have things in print, but you can't assume that people aren't. I actually am horrible at social media. Some of our older residents, they are the best at it. A lot of people we found, they know Facebook, because that's how you learn to connect with grandchildren. That's how you can post photos. So if you want to do something online, put it on Facebook. And like I said, word of mouth seems to be the #1 way. So you just have to find the right person to do it. It's really important to find your partners. I say yes to everybody, and some it's, it's really obvious who's going to be interested in age friendliness. So the senior center, if you have one, if there are senior clubs, like social clubs, the libraries, they do so much programming, or just people hang out. In one of our libraries, they say in the morning, men go and they come and read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and then they go get a cup of coffee and hang out at the bagel shop, because they used to ride the train together. The library is right next to the train station. They still meet up and do that. So if you want to find retired men in our town, you go to the library first thing in the morning. Recreation probably has senior programming like fitness and arts and things like that. If you have local healthcare or a hospital, your local health department. Depending on your size, if you have staff or nurses who do health outreach, those are important and pretty obvious. The not-so-usual suspects are, for us at least, the art groups around town. We are a very artistic community, but everybody wants to fill their audience. So people never would have thought, I'm going to reach out to the senior apartments or the senior club. But when we started talking, they want that audience filled. They want people there, enjoying it. They want somebody to hear the music. We have a lot of outdoor events in the summer. We've got music every weekend. And by telling me about it, and I communicated to the senior community, their attendance has gone up. So now, of course, they give me information for the next time. We've got a really good partnership going. Schools with intergenerational programming, if you can do that, is great, but just the performances and the sports. I mean, if people are on a fixed income going to the free high school football game, or the $5 school play, there's a lot going on that people can take advantage of, which they might not have thought of. You don't have to go into New York City to see a play. Your high school might be doing a really good one. And local businesses. So we have a discount program, kind of like, if you go to ShopRite and show your ShopRite card, you get things on sale. We have one for local businesses. And we've explained to them, we have 6,000 people in these two little towns. And these small stores, they're competing with the .coms and Amazon and the big box stores. You give people a discount, they will shop locally. Most people want to shop locally. And then several of the seniors, like Nan told me, she goes, I don't really use the card because I feel bad. I don't really want the discount. But it's built a great awareness. Now I can talk to the businesses about renovations and being more age-friendly, like their lighting, their entrance, taking out that step and making it a slope. That goes a long way. A great tool for this is the New York City Age-Friendly Guide. You can find it online. It spells out everything, and it's fantastic. And I just shared that with the Chamber of Commerce. And the real surprising one is realtors. I was avoiding them for a while because I thought, they want to sell the houses and get people out. We have a lot of people moving into our towns to be near the grandkids and the adult children. And a lot of them are in senior apartment buildings, but most are in the regular apartment buildings that are coming up around town. So we probably have we have several hundred every year coming in, and everybody was surprised by this. There's a big concern that if you put in apartment buildings, there's going to be more kids in the schools, and we don't have room. It's senior citizens who are moving. And one of the reasons they're moving to these apartments is they can walk to the downtowns and don't have to drive as much anymore. So the things to avoid, and this I'm just going to save you a lot of time because we learned some of these the hard way. So avoid recreationalizing it. It is so easy for things to be in like the senior center or the rec center budget. There's so much more to age friendliness than recreation. Recreation is wonderful, but that's not it, and that's not where you stop. Avoid ineffective committee members. So we had a little bit of a challenge building one advisory committee in one town, and I won't name which one, because I don't know who's going to watch this later. But it was kind of the consolation prize. If you didn't win office, or if you complained a lot to the mayor, or if you were like that stone in the shoe, you got put on the senior advisory committee. So we had a really rough start until people realized, you know, it wasn't just their venting and their complaint session. One size does not fit all, and that's something I fight again and again. People say, oh, well, just do this. It'll work for everyone. So if you think of a retiree, or you know, what we would call senior or older residents, 60 to, as Christine said, 100. That would be saying the needs are the same for everybody from when they graduated from college until they retire. And you know those needs are not the same. When you're at different phases of your life, your needs are different. Your activity level, your finances, your health. One size does not fit all. Don't let anybody tell you it does. And the other thing is you really need to be able to deliver something so you don't get volunteer burnout. I think, you know, everybody's been in agreement with that, where you start off strong and after a while people just, you know, they fizzle out. So you can start with smaller things or high visibility things. For us, it was the newsletter that really helped us get started. And through that, we could communicate everything else we were doing. We could keep things going. So I think some of the best examples that we've pulled off so far, some are harder than others, but we tap into things like Conversation of Your Life, which is done by the Mayor's Wellness Campaign out of the New Jersey Quality Institute. They were great to work with. They have the information all together and helped us do programming for talking about those conversations that nobody wants to talk about. And it was interesting because our older residents, when we brought this up, I thought, you know, it's going to be really touchy. They're like, I want to talk about end-of-life planning and healthcare. It's my daughter or my son who doesn't want to do it. So that had a great impact, and it brought a lot of people together. We had a transportation summit, and we published a transportation guide for the several options of getting around town or getting around the county. It took a very long time, but we have a resource directory. Because if you're looking for something, if you're online or you go here or there, it's hard to pull all the information together in one place and sort out the good from the bad, so we put it all together in one resource directory. We gave out 500 copies over the summer. My favorite is, I bought a tent. One of the first things I did was I bought a tent. And I have hauled that tent all over the place. It has been at 4th of July, at the outdoor concerts, the evening concerts, the street fairs. People love the tent. Because if you want to go somewhere, you know, you're going to haul your beach chair, step over everybody else at the outdoor concert, or it might be intimidating to go alone. When we have the senior tent or the senior rest area, you know there are other people there. We make it easy. Just show up and enjoy yourself. And I have people now, these community groups on the weekends, they're fighting for my tent. That's how popular it's become. And last year we did a housing forum. And again, it's the hardest thing to deal with in New Jersey, but starting in January, we are going to housing full on. A lot of the things that I think were successes help the whole community. We started it for seniors, but it really is good for everyone. So we do a volunteer fair now every year. We were looking at ways for engagement for seniors. And there's no volunteering scope, but if I had a volunteer fair and said it's for, you know, only people over 65 or retired, then what would my turnout be? Our first one, we had 28 organizations and 300 visitors. Kids who are going for their bar mitzvah project, all the way up to an 80-year-old who finally retired because she thought, I'm tired of riding the train, what am I going to do now? So that was a great success and brought the community together. The Phenomena Sweep in New Jersey, Repair Cafe. Look it up. It's an international movement, and we started it in New Jersey. We break it, we try to fix it. If not, have a cup of coffee and some cookies, and everybody's happy. We just had one this weekend. We started something this year, solo walks, because people are, no, you're supposed to get out, you're supposed to exercise, be healthy, but if you're like me, you always find an excuse not to walk. So we've mapped out routes in our community, interesting routes, and one by one we're doing events to roll them out. Our first one was the outdoor art walk in South Orange. They had a brand new arts council, so we brought it together and had 40 people doing a group walk with a tour around the outdoor art. And then the community calendar. So anybody who gives me anything is put on the calendar, and I get the information out there for seniors. And it's, the libraries, the art group, whoever. I'll put anything. And it makes it easier for people to find things. When we were looking at who goes to the website, it's like teenagers go to it to find out what's going on. Moms go, everybody's going to look at the calendar. So that's been, I think, something that we've given back to the community. And the biggest challenges are competing for resources. Everything's expensive. We compete for volunteers. We've got, 12 work groups instead of one with 12 subcommittees. We've got multiple this and multiple that. People are busy. So we're not competing for money as much as we are for people's time, and that can be really challenging. We have not been able to get into the schools. People want intergenerational programming, but I don't know about the schools here, but now, schools are like security places. You can't get in unless you have a child there, they're locked up. So we haven't made any progress with that, and but I do think it's worth trying again. We have turf battles, so we talk about sharing, and we're a two-town community. People don't want to give up their group or their volunteers or their credit for something. So turf battles are hard to sort through. And the stereotypes. My favorite was when we have our latest walking map. There are murals along one avenue in town. It's it'll be 1 mile loop with 6 different murals on it. It's great, they're gorgeous. Someone goes, I said, do you want to do it with us? Do you want to we'll have a day, we'll make an event. I said, I think that's too far for seniors to walk. So we just had a walking competition for Fitness Day, and one woman was doing 5 miles a day, more than me. So no, a 1 mile flat walk is not too far for everybody, and you don't get to make that decision for people. So don't let people make stereotypes. Because again, retired people, the range of interest and capability is as much as we look at the 21 to retiree age. And we have to really fight the one-size-fits-all mentality. Like if we do this, it's going to work for everybody. It's not. The forum and survey we just had, people pointed out, I'm an empty nester. I'm just retired. That's very different than someone who's been retired for 15 years, whose kids are long gone and they're working with grandchildren. So we have to step back and look at it differently and say, okay, we've got to break it up. We've got to look at age groups and interest groups and ability groups and not do as much, okay, this would work for everybody, because it doesn't. So it's a good case to know your audience and know what they want. And I think that's all for me.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Greenfield, and I'm the Associate Professor of Social Work right here at Rutgers State University. And it's really my privilege and pleasure to be able to talk a little bit about my work in the mix of all the wonderful work that's already happening in New Jersey. And I just want to acknowledge and honor your work coming out tonight or watching the feed and learning about this really exciting global movement that's gaining traction right here in our own geography. So, as the prior presentations demonstrated, age-friendly, when you step back and think of it as maybe not necessarily a specific practice or not a specific policy, but really as kind of a movement, as a social change movement in the face of population aging in Western societies, it's a very lofty, aspirational movement, right? It's trying to get at things like livability, all aspects of all people's lives. And so we can see this flower model of the different domains of what makes a community more or less age-friendly. And just already appreciate that these 8 domains cover so many different facets of people's lives and society as a whole. So just to give you one example, this is taken straight from AARP's materials, the domain of transportation. So here's the aspiration. Driving shouldn't be the only way to get around. Public transit options can be as expansive as a train system or as targeted as a taxi service that provides non-drivers with rides to and from a doctor's office. So basically trying to get at mobility, right? So the question is, what do you do with these aspirational visions and start trying to make change, especially at the local level, like at the level of a borough? And the World Health Organization and the AARP as well provide some beginning models of kind of wrapping our heads around what age-friendly community change process entails. So this is something that Christine already presented. This just is in a different graphic form. But basically these 4 kind of phases of the work. So this engagement period, followed by a planning period, and then this big chunk of act, right? So like you come up with a plan and then you just implement the action plan. And then evaluating it and going back. And so I kind of think as a researcher, you know, delineating these phases is a good first step of getting at the development of age-friendly community change, in so much that it's similar to delineating phases of an individual's life, you know, that there's some sense that these things evolve over time, and we can start getting some language to describe what this multi-year, long period of time change process is going to look like. But really, what's been the focus of my work in all of this, in partnership with wonderful people like Christine and Kathy, who are doing the hard work, is to really understand what processes are driving the development of these initiatives, to really build the science of age-friendly community change so that new communities coming online can jump the learning curve and get out of the gate quicker, as well as deepen and enhance the work of communities that are already committed to this process. So to give you a little bit of background, my work has been largely in northern New Jersey with funding from 2 private philanthropies that do grant making and aging. So the Bartle Fund for Senior Care, which is a catalyst funder for the work that's being done in South Orange and Maplewood, and that kind of multi-county area in the red circle. And then the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation, working in parallel with the Grata Fund, has funded 5 additional communities in Bergen County. And they do their grant making in Bergen and Passaic counties, and they also fund my research in this area in part. So I've been studying the development of 8 initiatives that have been catalyzed by these funders as part of a regional grant making initiative to spur the development of age-friendly community initiatives in northern New Jersey. And this has led to these 2 reports, which are online, as well as 1 academic article and some other academic articles, hopefully coming out pretty soon. So I'm just going to cut to the point of what are we learning in terms of the program. Like if we're going to build a program model for age-friendly community change, what might it start looking like? And this is a simple version. I think there's a lot more nuance that could go into any parts of this model, but I'm just going to provide a quick overview to kind of tickle your neurons around what underlying processes might guide work in this area. So I'm going to start with this first box, which is the inputs, like what are the things that are going into the engine of age-friendly community change, followed by the subsequent boxes. So we'll start with the age-friendly leadership teams and how they influence other community leaders and networks. And this follows well from the prior presentations as well. So this is good synergies. Okay, so age-friendly leadership teams under this grant-making initiative in northern New Jersey, when there's actual grant funding to pay leaders time to do some of this work, and it's usually part-time positions of the leaders who are doing it. The person who's kind of the grant, salaried on the grant is not working alone. In none of the 8 communities is that person working all by themselves. They're usually part of some kind of leadership team. And these are the individuals who meet regularly and have primary responsibility for moving the entire initiative forward. So they're not just focused on just housing or just transportation. They're kind of the big picture team looking across these different domains. And the most common arrangement, although it's definitely not the only arrangement, is to have someone designated as a project coordinator or the project director, and then there might be like an executive level of the nonprofit in which these initiatives are vetted who kind of provides strategic input on a regular basis as part of the team. And then oftentimes there's students or people who are kind of earlier in their career, someone very, very part-time, doing kind of hourly project assistant type work with boots on the ground type tasks. So the really important thing to understand is even though I call these entities the age-friendly leadership teams, they also cannot work in a vacuum. If it's just this group of people doing the hard work, the initiative is not, in my opinion, not achieving the level and the depth of community change that this whole idea is supposed to address. They have to be tapping into networks of other individuals and leveraging the influence of other community leaders. And this is just a list of the variety of kind of, you can almost think of them as like network nodes or organizations that are connectors to big groups of people within the communities that I've been studying over the years. So clearly elected leaders, but also like the borough manager and all the department heads, like the head of engineering becomes very important, if for certain kinds of achieving a certain goals. Members of municipal committees, like Who do we know on the planning board? And how much are they thinking about long lives as part of the deliberations? Local community organizations and voluntary groups, schools, faith-based organizations, especially if there's like an interfaith council or these kind of convening groups, chambers of commerce where the business is already connected. There's a sense from the people who are participating in interviews with me as part of the study that when there's kind of a connecting entity already in place, it's easier to get that leverage. But it doesn't mean that if you don't have like an interfaith council, you can't work with faith-based organizations. It just means that it's going to require a little bit more time and effort to kind of connect with each one, as opposed to a group that's already well networked. Also, the leadership teams work to leverage resources outside of the community. So for example, I mentioned interns from universities, student interns from universities, regional nonprofits like a hospital that might serve a greater geographic area but isn't necessarily right in that community. Statewide organizations like AARP New Jersey, who provide support and connections to the national livability movement. County offices are becoming more important as this work matures. You know, you want to kind of change the design of a road that needs a road diet, but oftentimes those big roads are managed by counties, not under local control. And then even state legislators to make them aware of what the challenges and opportunities are for people who are aging in place in the geography. Okay, so together, you know, these people resources basically are working to achieve certain activities and outputs. And these are the many things that were talked about already, but just to give you some examples from across our network of activities and output, this is a picture from Lifelong Elizabeth where the initiative partnered with the local police department to hand out pedestrian safety vests and do workshops on pedestrian safety targeted toward older community members. This is from Englewood, and they created a very comprehensive and thoughtfully designed directory of available resources in their region and did a very deliberate outreach effort to make sure the directories were distributed through all the networks of people and organizations in their community for older adults. This is a picture from a walkability study in Ridgewood, and they partnered with a statewide consulting group that does walkability assessments, like has the community go through a collaborative method to target certain areas that can be improved in terms of its design for safe walkability. And this is a good example where the consulting company didn't charge the initiative or the community anything. They are funded through, I believe, a statewide grant, and they just are looking for communities to implement this work in as part of a statewide program. And through the various connections, they were able to get the consulting firm to come to Ridgewood specifically as part of the initiative. So it really shows how they can position a group that's ready to capitalize on outside resources and bring it in for the benefit of the local community. And then, of course, there's lots of meetings, and we already heard a little bit about senior advisory committees. There's coalitions, some people call them just general partners groups or stakeholder committees or whatever. And even the formation of those structures. So we found, like, since these initiatives started in 2016 to now, the very kind of what are the governance groups, how are they related, that has matured over time. It's become more organized. It's kind of, there's been a little bit of shakedown and playing around and seeing what works best. And now, finally, 3 years into the implementation, our communities are getting progressively more crystallized in terms of how these structures work. And that is an output in its own right, to have these structures that organize people to continue to work together. So the question is, how do these kind of singular achievements or accomplishments or activities or events or products actually relate back to the aspirational goals of the age-friendly movement? So how do we get these smaller, seemingly small things, not to discredit the hard work that it takes to even do small things and the meaning that can have everyone's lives who are involved, but how does this relate back to the bigger systems level and long-term change? And this is where the idea of gaining traction becomes really important, and this is kind of the current big picture thought lesson from the qualitative research study that I've been doing. It's not a linear process. The idea is that every time you have one of these time-limited or seemingly small events or products that result, that if you can leverage what's gained through that to increase the enthusiasm, the awareness, the buy-in, the recognition of what the age-friendly initiative at the local level is trying to achieve, whether that's people in positions of power, like elected officials or certain department heads or that key community leader, or whether that's just the public at large. So it's just growing the political will for age-friendly community change locally. That could then feed back into the inputs and lead to progressively deeper and more expansive goal achievement over time. So just to put it in plain language, the idea is not just what outputs are achieved, but who contributed to achieving it, what relationships were mobilized, what relationships were strengthened in the process. So kind of developing all that good social capital around age-friendly that then makes this fabric of a community stronger as it seeks to get progressively and progressively deeper into age-friendly community change. And I would add to have their age-friendly community work touch the lives of more and more people with particular attention to older adults who are aging in place who aren't the first ones to come out to a town hall meeting and talk about how to make their community more age-friendly. They're not the first ones to volunteer to be on that senior advisory committee, and over time, I think, as you kind of gain this traction, there's more and more chance of being able to address not just long lives, but also unequal lives in the context of place. So right, the goals, the growing involvement of community stakeholders, and aligning their own resources toward age-friendly aspirations. So it's kind of like trying to influence other people to do what they're already doing, but just like shift it a little bit more intentionally into issues of longevity and population aging. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over this example, but I just want to kind of conclude by saying that there's oftentimes, I think, a hazard when we talk about this work for people to step away and be like, well, that sounds great, but if only we had foundation grant funding in Middlesex County, then we could do this work, right? Or if only the county had some kind of initiative and they were supporting different regions and we could tie into that. Or if only there was a local nonprofit who was a big advocate already on nonprofit housing and on affordable housing, then we can just work with them to address the need for housing as people grow older. Better bus service, a home sharing program, a co-housing community, etc. There's always something that you wish, you look at these other communities and you say, well, of course they could do that because they had, X, Y, Z in place. And I think there's this growing recognition that that is a way to really zap energy away from change when you just focus or are waiting on something else that's really out of your control at that moment. And so I just want to mention this book is a framework that I found really helpful in terms of kind of kickstarting inspiration and just beginning and focusing not just, you hear a lot about asset-based community development, like focus on what the community does have and mobilize that. This idea of strategic doing takes that idea one step further by saying, let's just not focus on our assets. Let's focus on the assets that are already coming to the table to talk about age-friendly, which would be like people in this room right here. Like, let's just take the here and now of what we can do that's going to be meaningful in some way, but also feasible right now. We don't have to wait on any of those if-onlys changing. This is something that's within our reach and within our ability to do with the strengths we have right now to make change. And then the idea is that in the process of doing whatever that thing is, in collaboration, that is the key, with multiple people aligning their resources in ways together towards some shared goal, that could be kind of a good catalyst for showing a broader universe of stakeholders what is possible when that's done in an intentional and truly collaborative way. So I'll just end by saying thank you to the two foundations that make it possible for me to be able to share this work, as well as people like Kathy, Gordon, and Eric for volunteering and speaking with me as part of an ongoing research study, as well as the broader New Jersey Alliance of Age-Friendly Communities, and to you all for coming out.
Anybody want to have a question, ask a question right now?
I'm just feeling overwhelmed, which I guess is to be expected. That's not a question, it's just...
Right.
Yeah.
So, a big challenge, of course, in New Jersey is always transportation, right? So, Highland Park is 1 square mile, so within town it's very easy, right? But if you need to go out of town for something, what is the, so I'm very familiar with Maplewood South Orange since I grew up in Maplewood. But some of the other towns that you deal with, what, like, in terms of, you know, I don't know, I feel like we're small, right? And so to try and deal with some of these challenges of particularly transportation, you know, within town I could see doing it, but, you know, if you need, there's now a CVS close by. Okay, you can't get to a CVS without using a car. So, has anyone made any progress in that kind of area?
Why don't I just say it for the folks at home? Basically, what you are asking about, if I understand correctly, is the whole issue of transportation, which is so big here in New Jersey. And you're talking about the fact that in Highland Park, being 1 square mile, there are various possibilities, and actually some that already exist. But the issue is, how do you use or figure out ways of transportation so that people can get to necessary things that are beyond this 1 square mile?
So that is a very good question, and it's something that we have been working on and made some progress. So each of our towns has a train station, and they have commuter jitneys to take people in the morning. So years ago, they started using one of the commuter jitneys. They stopped going to the train station at 9 to offer service to seniors within town. And one does a shopping loop, goes around and around. You call, you say, I want to get on it today, the driver knows where he left you, and he knows to come back for you. And the other one is kind of like taxi service a couple days a week, and on Fridays it goes to ShopRite, and on another day it'll go to the mall. So they're very different. And honestly, for 2 years I've been trying to merge them together, and we still haven't quite gotten there. So it is challenging. But if you have anything that's already going for either commuters or even the schools or anything that's already happening, try to tag that on for seniors. If you own the school buses, we don't bus in our schools, everybody supposedly walks, but we have very little bus service. But I know in another town they use the school buses because they're sitting in a parking lot from 9 to 1:30. So that might be a way to see, can you test it out one day a week and see who goes. And it'd be really important to communicate it, because if people don't know about it, they don't use it, and if they don't use it, people say, oh, there's not a need. But there are other things that we experimented with, like GoGo Grandparent. It's like concierge service for Uber. If you don't have a smartphone, you call them and they will find the ride for you. And we did a pilot project with that. The Tri-Towns group, that has been their main focus, and they've got great data. They're trying to get more funding from the stores and the hospitals where people use it to go. Honestly, like Uber and Lyft, the on-demand services, has really revolutionized senior transportation and people's ability to get around. So if you had some money to subsidize rides, we did it where we had 4 rides a month and you had $10 towards those rides. And if you went further than that, you paid the difference. And we had 123 people sign up for GoGo Grandparent. So now it's up to them to keep using it, but it was a way of introducing people to something. So I would say, see what your assets are and if there's any town vehicle out there that you can hijack and do a little test with and see how it goes, but also share information with other people about these on-demand services. And the final one that I thought was really good, one town had coupons for the local taxi service. I think it's Montclair. The local taxi services, they're like going out of business because of Uber and Lyft and things like that. So if they work out coupons, then people would call them and it helps them stay in business and helps people get around. If we're being overwhelmed, just start small. Find some talk to people, find your NAN, and find something that you can start with small.
What about paying for? I don't get how some of these things were paid for. I'm having a hard time partially hearing. If you hold it, maybe.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that's a lot louder now. So the commuter jitneys and the senior bus in the towns, they're paid for by the town. And our GoGo Grandparent pilot, we use our grant money for. So we had grant money to fund that. With the taxi cab program, in at least one town, I know the taxi cab offered it for their own business because they saw it as a way to, draw in more business and keep themselves going.
I just want to reiterate one key phrase that Kathy used in her response, which is see how it goes. I think that is what a lot of the initiatives in our network have come to embrace, because they're humbled by the fact that what they originally thought was a solution actually didn't work. And it's wonderful to have these initiatives where that is the whole point. The point is, like, if you're gonna fail, like, at least fail fast and learn something from it and leverage that for what you're gonna try next. And I really think it's this whole kind of spirit of a more design-based approach to addressing challenges and seizing opportunities as opposed to an engineering. Engineering approach is like, you define the problem, you gather extensive information from everybody, all the experts, and you write a whole huge plan, and then you go out and you implement the plan, and then you go prove that the plan worked, right? And like that might work for designing motor engines, with the cars we're starting to develop. But like when it comes to humans and all their complexity, especially when they've had lifetimes of experiences to become different from each other, and communities are so complicated, that I think the design-based thinking is a more promising approach. It's a little bit more humbling because you can't just like solve a problem unilaterally. It becomes more about like likelihood and for whom and how, and this kind of iterative process. But I think in transportation in particular, there's been a lot of experimentation in our network, and just now, like definitely not in the first year of trying did they feel satisfied. It's now, like a couple years later, that they feel like they're settling on something promising, and then able to use that to try to convince like local officials or possible external grant funders or local businesses to then support something that works rather than support an idea that very well might not work.
I have very little to add to this actually, because I think you guys hit the nail on the head. The one additional piece I will say is, sort of just around like funding again. I think the idea of starting small with a pilot on any of this is critical. It's also great when you're talking about how do we get those small successes early. But the other piece that is in play here is when we talk about specifically our older adults, there is a huge economic powerhouse, right, that older adults bring, and it's called the longevity economy. So when you can frame conversations around the success of your programs and also tie it to, there's an economic benefit to small business, local business. What's the health benefit, right, if you're talking to a hospital? I mean, literally, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I know it's, when we talk about a longevity economy, it is trillions of dollars that our 50 plus contributes to this economy. So sometimes it's how you sort of frame that conversation a little bit, and any way you can bring in the fact that, hey, if you want to partner on a rideshare program and you're talking to like a local chamber of commerce or business association, well then if you're letting folks, giving them better access to get to the downtown, they're going to spend money in that downtown, and that money is then going to go into driving the economic engine of that community. So I think that's an important piece that you can kind of just bring to the table too. Sorry, I couldn't turn this one.
Oh, one thing that I think is important to remember is that we have a fairly active senior set of activities in town. We now have the old senior center is now the community center, but a lot of their activities are funded by the federal government through the area agencies on aging. There's also a lot of stuff that might be available through the Medicaid program, for example, has a lot of their funding goes for long-term care and for creating community-based institutions so that people don't go into nursing homes. That's a long way off from starting, but it is a way of saying that there are often resources that we don't really think about right now that one might be able to do something once we get much more sophisticated about how to do it. Another question.
Well, it's not a question, but I do want to comment that the Middlesex County is a resource. They have transportation facilities. I worked as the operations manager for the county for many years. And if you go to them, you can lobby to get the kind of transportation that you need. There's also New Jersey Transit, which can facilitate for getting you out of town. And there's also public transportation. New Jersey Transit has a bus on the avenue. So there are resources out there, but you have to reach out to them. They're probably not going to come to you.
Just to summarize what you were saying is that what you're pointing out is that one of the major focus or foci is to look at the county level, Middlesex County, which has resources that aren't necessarily distributed until people ask for them.
You have to lobby for it.
Yep.
So, and I think that conversation we just had, right, is sort of an example of when we talk about the domain of communication, is sometimes your first step, right, a small step is, let's just do that asset inventory and put together a resource of what does exist in the transportation space. Somerset County actually just did that and put together a complete transit guide. And, that was, for a lot of folks, just really eye-opening to know what is already in existence. That can sometimes be that first step, right, before you kind of tackle more of like what we want to build from.
I would also say that a wonderful thing about getting into this work now is that networks already exist in our state. So for example, on the transportation guide topic, one of our communities developed like an extensive booklet of transportation with maps, and then another community saw that and said, this is a great idea, but we need something much simpler. We need something that's not like a booklet, we need like a one-pager where people can just go zip, 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 and kind of like in a sentence understand what each one is. But that's great because there's building synergies off of each other and creating different models. And so I think a lot in age-friendly now is kind of this idea of work smarter, not harder, and tapping those networks that already exist. So like, and using it as an asset to bring to the table at the local level. So if the project is something around information and communication around existing transportation services, all you have to do is ask any one of us, to say, like, what did they do up in North Jersey, and the Alliance will come through, and like, that's how Kathy got here, right, is through talks with Beth and thinking, who would be a good person from our network who could, speak to the Highland Park experience potentially and have some similarities. So it's already, those assets are already being mobilized in our state, and I think what we're learning is that when it comes to deep age-friendly community change, like the big system stuff that takes time and that really can't be solved at the local level, these local initiatives are starting to connect with each other in terms of advocating for county level or statewide shifts in resources that can be helpful to a much broader swath. So it's very exciting to kind of think local, but always see yourself as part of the growing movement. So there's a real opportunity, I think, to build synergies with other people in our state who are already doing this work and passionate to take it eventually to a next phase of really getting to people in positions of power who can change things to fundamentally make these things easier for everybody.
We share a lot between the 12 communities. We share everything, so, and we would be happy to share with you too.
Question? I have one. Of all the things that you have, all the communities that you know of, and the activities that you have been aware of, what is the most surprising success and the most unusual success? We talk about transportation, we talk about housing, we talk about snow shoveling, things like that. But after you go around, what has been an activity that really you wouldn't have thought of that an age-friendly community would want or need?
I'm thinking of this because we just had one this weekend, but I put on my slide Repair Cafe. And it sounds like the silliest thing, but we have a woman who is well into her 60s, maybe 70, and she works for the EPA, and her husband is on the Southern Senior Advisory Committee. And she told us about this thing on how you repair things instead of throwing them out, and would I be interested? And we thought, well, this is a great intergenerational thing, because older people remember fixing things, and like my kids are growing up in a world where you throw everything out, so we thought this is going to be really interesting. And it has taken off, and it was not on the original survey or like my plan or whatever, but somebody came with a good idea and we listened and then we communicated it out there, and it is just one of the most fun community builders I've ever seen. And it's spreading now to other towns in New Jersey. There's no downside to it. So I think it worked so well because it came from the senior group themselves. It helps everybody. We had people there bringing in their stroller wheels to get fixed this weekend. So, I had never heard of it before, but that's something that's really become one of the big successes in our community, because it's attention getting, and everybody feels good, and it's just a win all around.
So I have two things. So when I think about sort of just maybe a surprising model for some of this age-friendly work, one of our communities, and I think it's the only community I'm aware of, where the age-friendly initiative is actually housed within two different departments in local government, but it's the police department and the health department. And the police department isn't necessarily one of those, right, like those usual suspects that we think of, but it's actually been really effective because it's housed within like the community affairs department. And I think that has just been a really successful model for how do you have, the community grassroots impact, but you also have that connection to the local government, which is very critical. So that was something when I first heard, I was like, what does that even look like? And then seeing that work evolve has been really interesting. The other, from like an event or like initiative perspective, that is surprising and something that we started engaging in, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, but is this idea around some placemaking projects and how that can really tie to age-friendly work. So I'm talking about placemaking, I'm talking about, we did like an alley activation project in Metuchen. There were some safety concerns where people were trying to drive down this alley and were coming out on the sidewalk, right, where pedestrians are walking. And there was just a disconnect between like that area of the main street and like this whole part behind it. And so we did some temporary pop-ups in that alley, and it's now actually has a Facebook page. But there's sort of these like creative sort of pop-up projects that can actually really be demonstration tools that you can use on some age-friendly initiatives. So if you want to do some park improvements, how do you do some low-cost temporary things in one day that can kind of like show the need for future improvements? I've actually been very interested to see how some of those sort of like non-traditional placemaking has been effective in age-friendly work.
I'll just quickly add, I've been really happy to see the kind of community of practice evolve around age-friendly community initiative. What kind of started as individual grants to individual communities has evolved into a synergy across a wonderful statewide network. And I would say that the 8 initiatives funded by the 2 philanthropists up north are continuously in contact with Montclair, who's outside of the network and has good connections with Princeton as well, and just hoping to continue to grow across the geography of New Jersey, because it's really incredible to see how much fun and how much people are learning in their relationships with each other, and constantly thinking about how the stuff they're doing at the local level transcends their geography and their lives too. And it's really, a lot of the leaders are talking about it as kind of their swan song of their life, like something really, really meaningful personally to them to be able to do this work when they're very well established in their own careers or professions or volunteer work as well. It's been great.
Yes, you have a question.
I'm having trouble hearing what everybody's saying because of the echo and the...
Yeah, it's very hard.
So I may be asking a question that's already been answered. I apologize. I wanted to share, I think one of our biggest problems is communication here in Highland Park, because we have no newspaper that reflects anything, and I think you mentioned something about a newsletter. And I can see how something like that could bring things in Highland Park together. There was a start of a group called the Senior Social Network here in Highland Park. And we met over in the Reformed Church, which was a free place to meet. And the woman who started it would get speakers. We even had somebody from the funeral group in Princeton come and speak to us. A whole bunch of people went down and sat on, there are several houses of, when I say houses, there's an, like, they call it an art house, and I think they have like 400 people in it. People seniors in Princeton who are interested in art, and then there's one that's maybe politics, and we had friends go down and listen to what they did and ask them questions about how they organized. And it worked for about 2 years, and we went to meetings, we had buffet, potluck dinners at holiday time, and they charged $25 for dues. And that's what would pay for the potluck dinner, we'd have potluck dinners sometimes, and if we didn't want potluck dinners, we'd order from someplace and we'd bring in food. But I don't know how many people in Highland Park even knew that that was happening. And it was a nice thing now. I'm sorry to say the woman who started it has become ill, and she is now over at the Parker home. And the group has just kind of petered out. But I just got an email today from the Reformed Church, and they have a senior group, and they're inviting our group to join with the senior group at the Reformed Church. They meet every Thursday. It's a very, very active church socially, and there's a group called Who Is My Neighbor, which is not a religious group. It's just a group that reaches out and does things for people. They have do a lot of stuff for immigrants. They do a lot of stuff, very socially active. But this group, I got the email today. They're inviting our old senior group, which is kind of dead now, to join the senior group there and meet every Thursday for lunch in the Global Grace Cafe, which is kind of a fabulous little cafe where they don't charge a specific amount. If you don't have enough money, you don't have to pay for the whole lunch. Give what you can give what you can afford, and they make food that's kind of traditional, and the women that do it traditional food from their countries and stuff like that. It's a fun place. And then on one Thursday a month, they have a meeting. They have a senior meeting. The thing is that these things happen in Highland Park, and not everybody knows it. Word of mouth spreads some of it.
Yeah.
But if you don't get it, if only your friends find out about it, then there's a whole bunch of other people that never find out about it. Like, I've never seen any of these people at any of the senior meetings that I went to. It seemed, as I listened to all of you, it seems like the first thing that we need is a better communication here, a better communication system here in Highland Park.
Yeah.
And how did you do your newsletter?
So, I actually found out about our newsletter from one of the other towns. It's LPI, Liturgical Publications. They do church bulletins, and they've moved into the senior newsletter market. It's the same thing. It's free to us. So, and I have a copy that I can show you. So they come in, they sell the ads, and they give us a template, and we fill it in, we fill in the calendar. So it's absolutely free to us. We only pay for the postage because we decided to mail it. Other towns have it out in the senior center, but we don't have one big senior center. We're kind of spread out all over the place.
When you say mail it, who pays for the mail it?
I've been using grant money to pay for that, and it's part of our grant money we were using to pay for communications. A couple of times we had a local business, like a home care business, said, "Oh, I'll pay for the postage this month," and we put their name on the back, like a big thank you to. And now the towns need to figure out how much of that they're going to pick up, because it's been growing and growing. And communications, it's like when you go to the movies, you see the preview for the next movie, and you say, "Oh, I'm going to go see that when it comes out." You don't go to the movies, you don't know what movies are coming out this holiday season. So you've got to be in it to know what else is going on. And with the newsletter, having all these community events together in one place, people I didn't know that was going on. So it kind of, builds itself. But there are some, these church bulletin companies that will do it for free. If you can find one, and I can give you more information on one of these, they've been great and very, very helpful.
Well, I think we're getting close to the end of this part of it. It sounds like there would be interested in other things going further down the road. It sounds to me not only do we need coordination, but I think we need to begin to do, if we want to, if there are people who want to, a kind of a census of our assets. And we are a community that has a lot of assets. We're close to Rutgers. We are close to New Brunswick with its train station. I mean, there's a number of things. I won't go on. I'm sure you all can do it. But what I'd like to do at the end of this is ask if people would like to sign a list that they would be interested in taking it the next step further here in Highland Park to see what maybe we could do. So I guess what I'd like to do is thank the three. Have been really, I think, inspiring, very thought-provoking, and with luck, some of us will be in contact. So thank you, and thank you all for coming out.